Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. First class is for premium passengers only. The words, laced with condescension, cut through the bustling noise of boarding LT. General Marcus Steele stood at the threshold of the first-class cabin, suitcase in hand, calm in posture. But the pilot, who'd emerged from the cockpit with a furrowed brow and a rigid stance, blocked the way like a bouncer at an exclusive club. "I am a premium passenger," Marcus replied evenly. The pilot scoffed, glancing down at the uniform. "Right. And I'm the President of the United States. Step back, sir. We don't need any disruptions today." Passengers nearby began to slow their movements, sensing tension. A mother pulled her child close. Someone whispered, "What's going on? You sure he's not just wearing that for show?" Another muttered. Marcus didn't flinch. His eyes remained locked on the pilot's, steady and unreadable. Years in command had taught him not to blink when stared down. But inside, a storm brewed. Not for himself, he'd faced worse, but for what it symbolized. Another uniform, another black man, still questioned. The pilot raised his voice. "Sir, I'm giving you one last warning. Move back. You're holding up boarding." Marcus glanced down at his boarding pass. First class, clearly printed, unmistakable. Still, he said nothing. A child in the coach asked, "Mummy, why are they yelling at the soldier?" The answer hung in the silence like smoke. Marcus stood motionless, the silver eagle insignia glinting faintly on his shoulders. The stripes told a story no one in that cabin seemed willing to read. A veteran of 3 deployments, decorated for valor, commander of airmen whose lives he'd once held in the palm of his hand. And here he was, publicly doubted, dismissed like a trespasser in his own country. He inhaled through his nose, slow and deep, grounding himself. Not here, not now. He wouldn't give them the scene they clearly expected. The murmurs grew louder behind him. Someone whispered, "He looks legit though. Look at that uniform." But the pilot wouldn't budge. His eyes scanned Marcus's frame as though searching for a flaw, a crack, any reason to justify his stance, to justify the bias. Marcus looked past him toward the row of empty first-class seats. One of them had his name on it. He clenched his jaw, feeling the weight not of his duffel, but of history. "Captain," a flight attendant leaned in, her voice a hushed tremor. "I think you should look at his insignia again. That's a 3-star general." The pilot dismissed her with a quick shake of his head. "Probably sewn on from a costume shop. These things happen more than you think." She hesitated. "Sir, I don't think. Let me handle it, Michelle," he snapped. "We can't have impersonators walking onto planes in this climate." Passengers now openly stared. A businessman with a laptop mouthed, seriously. To his neighbor, Marcus caught the attendant's eye. She looked mortified. He offered her the briefest nod. A silent thanks in that moment. Marcus felt the divide. One voice trying to reason, swallowed by louder prejudice. The pilot stepped back, raising his voice for all to hear. "Attention passengers. We have a situation involving potential impersonation of military personnel. TSA has been alerted." Gasps filled the cabin. The whispering exploded into full-blown conversation. "Is he serious? That man's a fraud. He looks too calm to be guilty." Marcus remained where he was, dignity intact, but his fingers curled slightly around the edge of his boarding pass. "Sir," the pilot continued, "until security arrives, I'll have to ask you to stand by the gate." Marcus turned his head slowly, scanning the sea of faces. Most looked away, some glared, a few looked unsure. He said nothing, but one voice pierced. Through it was the same child from before. "Mummy, he's not bad. He helped us at the airport earlier, remember?" The mother looked torn. She pulled her daughter close again, but didn't reply. The shame wasn't in being questioned. It was in the silence of the good people. Marcus exhaled, then, with steady hands, he reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved his phone. No words, no looks, just one quick message, typed with military precision and sent. The pilot sneered, calling back up. "Huh, nice try. They won't save you." Marcus finally spoke, not to him, just quietly, to himself. They already did. The phone returned to his pocket, hands behind his back again, still, silent, still. A low rumble vibrated through the fuselage, then another. The sound grew, louder, sharper, unmistakable. Jet engines, not commercial, military. Passengers turned toward the windows. Gasps echoed like gunshots. "Are those ... fighter jets?" 3 F-22 Raptors soared overhead in formation, dipping low in a salute so calculated it sent shivers down spines. Phones came out, cameras clicked, a toddler clapped. The pilot paled, stepping back involuntarily. Marcus didn't move. The flight attendant's mouth fell open. She whispered, "My God, ... he really is ... Another message buzzed on Marcus's phone. He checked it. Then I finally looked the pilot in the eye. "I believe boarding is complete. Shall we take off?" "Stand tall, Marcus. Your grandfather flew when they said black men couldn't," his father once told him, his voice heavy with pride and unshakable duty. Marcus Steele was born into legacy his grandfather, a Tuskegee airman, had carved history into the skies. His father, a Vietnam veteran, raised him with an iron spine and a quiet fire. The walls of their Alabama home were lined with medals and framed letters from presidents. But none of it came with applause, came with expectations. Respect wasn't given in his family. It was earned every day under pressure. Marcus learned early that his skin would speak before his resume ever did. But in his blood ran generations of flight, fight, and quiet resistance at the Air Force Academy. Marcus graduated first in his class, sharpest pilot, unmatched discipline, flawless record. Yet he was never the face of the program brochures. "You're impressive for your background," one instructor had said, meaning it as a compliment. He got the top scores, but watched classmates with lesser records get leadership recommendations. The whispers followed him. Mustov had a quota to fill. Still, he flew. In Afghanistan, he led impossible missions, rescued downed teams, and earned 3 distinguished flying crosses. But even after 20 years of service, some officers still asked if he was the maintenance chief when he walked into a briefing. He didn't argue, he let his record speak. Because silence, paired with success, often said the most. Growing up in Montgomery, Marcus learned that survival wasn't loud, it was calculated. He watched his mother straighten her spine every time a store clerk followed her down the aisle. He saw his father grip the steering wheel a little tighter when a patrol car drove behind them. By 13, Marcus had already mastered the art of swallowing anger and answering ignorance with excellence. His grandmother called it Southern Steel, that rare kind of strength, born from oppression but forged in grace. "You don't need to raise your voice," she'd say, "when you carry the truth." That lesson stayed in his blood. The uniform took more than time it cost him. A marriage, Elaine, his ex-wife, had once understood the mission. But as years passed, his deployments stretched longer, and birthdays became phone calls from base camps. By the time their daughter, Alana, turned 11, the gap between them had grown too wide. Still, Marcus never missed a moment he could control. Video calls after school, letters in her lunchbox from overseas. Her walls were lined not with posters, but framed photos of her father standing beside aircraft, saluted by soldiers twice her size. To her, he wasn't just in the Air Force, he was the Air Force. Daddy's saving people, she'd say proudly to friends. What the world failed to see, Alana never missed. Marcus sat quietly in the boarding area of Gate B12, his cover in his lap, uniform crisp, eyes watching the departure screen. Alana had just been accepted to Howard University, first in the family to attend on scholarship, and tomorrow she turned 18. She didn't know he was coming. "Sir, are you traveling for work?" a woman had asked earlier. "No, ma'am," he replied, smiling softly. "Just going to see my daughter." There were no medals in his carry-on, no formal speech in hand, just a single card in his pocket that read, "To my hero from your biggest fan." Marcus wasn't flying to give orders. He was flying home to deliver joy, but the skies had other plans. Marcus had just stepped into the TSA line at Gate B12, the feeling of anticipation thick in the air. He'd already passed the metal detector with ease, but as he grabbed his bag from the conveyor, the agent stopped him. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." The agent's eyes flickered to his military ID, then quickly looked away. "I said, step aside." Marcus's brow furrowed. "I'm a decorated officer in the United States Air Force. I'm flying first class to surprise my daughter." "I don't care who you are," the agent snapped, interrupting him. "Just step aside." A couple of white passengers behind him glanced nervously but said nothing as they walked through. None of them questioned or delayed. Marcus stood motionless, breathing through his nose, his mind racing. This wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. After a few minutes, the agent waved him through with an exaggerated sigh. Marcus walked forward, but the sting of the unjust treatment remained. As boarding began, Marcus made his way down the jet bridge, pulling his roller bag with military precision. But when he reached the entrance to first class, the flight attendant blocked his path, her smile stiff and rehearsed. "Is there a problem, sir?" Marcus asked, confusion creeping into his tone. Sir, you're not supposed to be here," she said, eyes scanning his uniform with uncertainty. "First class is for ticketed passengers, and, well, you're not in the right uniform." For that, his heart sank. "This is my seat." The attendant hesitated, looking from his uniform to the ticket in her hand, clearly flustered. "Oh, sorry, sir. I didn't realize, ... Her voice trailed off, a thin veil of embarrassment coating her words. Marcus nodded, choosing not to respond. It wasn't worth explaining again. Marcus finally made his way to his seat, but just as he settled in, the pilot appeared at the cabin door. His uniform, sharp and pressed, didn't fit the weight of the words he was about to say. "Excuse me, sir," the pilot said, his voice not unfriendly, but firm. "Can I see your boarding pass?" Marcus held it up without hesitation. "Right. Here, sir." The pilot took a glance, then paused, his brow furrowing as he looked at Marcus's military insignia. "You sure you're in the right seat?" the pilot asked, a strange edge in his voice. "You're listed for 3A. but I don't see you on the manifest. This seat's for a different kind of passenger." Marcus took a deep breath, forcing calmness into his words. "I'm a decorated officer, sir. My name is Marcus Steele. You can check the database. It should be under my eye." But the pilot just stared at him, unwilling to budge. As Marcus waited, trying to stay composed, he heard a voice from behind him, soft but cutting. "They always try to fake it," a white passenger muttered, just loud enough for Marcus to hear. "I bet he's not even military. Probably some random guy trying to get a free ride." The words felt like ice-sharp, deliberate, and as familiar as the weight of the uniform on his shoulders. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He couldn't react. He wouldn't let them see the hurt. Not now, not here. His hands clenched, the only visible sign of his internal battle. He had to maintain control. Finally, Marcus stood, holding out his military ID and documents, attempting to prove the obvious. The pilot still wasn't convinced. "I'm not sure what you want from me," Marcus said, his voice steady but firm. "Check the military database. My credentials are valid. I'm telling you, I'm supposed to be here." The pilot shook his head. "That's not good enough." The words hit harder than anything. He had provided evidence proof of his service, his rank, his right to be there. Yet, it wasn't enough. "I'm sorry, sir, but you'll have to leave." Marcus's heart thundered in his chest. He wasn't just being removed from his seat. He was being denied what he'd earned, what he'd fought for, and for what? Because of his skin. "No," Marcus said, his voice low but unyielding. "Staying. I'm going to my daughter's birthday." The pilot took a step back, unwilling to escalate further, but still unsure. The tension was palpable. It was clear this wasn't going to end quietly. Marcus stood frozen, his mind still processing the absurdity of being questioned about his right to board a first-class seat. His military ID, the one he had carried proudly for years, seemed worthless now. The flight attendant had vanished, leaving the pilot and a pair of airport security officers in her wake. They had been called over by a growing murmur in the terminal where passengers watched. Their eyes filled with doubt. One of the security officers stepped forward, a glint of authority in his eyes. "Step away from the gate, sir now." Marcus glanced at the passengers who had seen it all unfold. He could feel the stares, the whispers, and the cold weight of judgment. Someone he couldn't see who pulled out their phone and began recording. The officer didn't even acknowledge it. "I'm not going anywhere," Marcus replied firmly, his voice steady despite the rising fury inside. "I'm a United States Air Force officer, and this is my seat." But the officer's face remained hard. "You're disrupting the boarding process. Either step aside, or we'll have to escort you out." Marcus could see the glint of his medals catching the light medals earned in combat, in service of his country. Yet, none of that mattered now. The officer's hand moved to his radio, waiting for backup. Amidst the tension, a small voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Mum, that's the guy from the military video." The boy's eyes were wide, his voice full of wonder. His mother, sitting a few rows away, quickly turned to hush him, her hand clamping over his mouth as she shot a nervous glance toward the security officers. She whispered sharply, glancing back at Marcus. "Don't say that. We don't know him." But the boy's innocent gaze never left Marcus, who felt the sting of those words, both genuine and painfully naive. The child saw him as a hero, a symbol of strength. Yet, his mother, who had been conditioned to see things differently, quickly imposed silence on the truth. Marcus gave a slight nod to the boy, a silent acknowledgement of the admiration that the child couldn't yet understand was often marred by the world's prejudices. Marcus stood in the middle of the terminal, surrounded by the eyes of onlookers who whispered to each other. Some tried to make their words subtle, but others weren't so quiet. "Is he really military?" a woman asked, her voice dripping with doubt. "I bet he just got a fake ID. No way a guy like that should be in first class." "Probably a con artist," a man beside her muttered. "They all try to get something for free." Marcus stayed silent, his fists clenched at his sides. His uniform, the very thing that should have earned him respect, was now a symbol of suspicion. "I don't think they'll let him board," another voice chimed in, louder this time. "He's probably some kind of fraud. They don't even look like they belong." Each word cut deeper than the last. Marcus wanted to lash out, to demand they prove his worth, but he held his tongue. His identity was being torn apart without a trial. No one cared to know the truth, only what they assumed. Just as the whispers reached a fever pitch, a soft voice broke through the tension. "I know this man. He's with the military. He's one of ours." The flight attendant, the same one who had hesitated before, said with conviction. She stepped forward, her voice louder now, cutting through the murmurs. "He has a seat here. I've seen his boarding pass." But the pilot quickly turned to her, his face as cold as before. "That's not enough. He needs to prove it. We can't just take his word for it. He's a threat until we see the documentation." The attendant opened her mouth to argue, but the pilot cut her off with a swift motion of his hand. "He stays here until we sort this out." The attendant stood, her face flushing with frustration, but there was nothing more she could do. She backed off, her brief attempt at defense swallowed by the cold skepticism around her. Marcus glanced at her, the fleeting spark of allyship extinguished. As quickly as it had ignited, the security officers moved in then, their steps deliberate. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to sit down while we sort this out." Marcus was led to a bench in the middle of the terminal, an open spectacle. For everyone to see, he sat down, not out of compliance, but because there was nothing left to do. His hands gripped the edge of the bench, his chest tightening as more eyes turned on him. The passengers, some of whom had been silent, now watched intently, their gazes full of pity or judgment. No one came to his side. No one offered support. He was a man trapped by his skin, by assumptions that had no foundation in truth. A black janitor passed by, pushing a mop along the floor. He stopped when he saw Marcus. Their eyes met. There were no words, but the understanding was clear. A slow nod from the janitor. It was brief, but the weight of that nod was heavy, laden with the years of shared suffering that transcended their brief interaction. The janitor's face told the story of what had happened to both of them, what had been taken, what had been denied. Marcus lowered his eyes, the sting of it settling deep within. The janitor didn't speak a word, but his silent solidarity was enough. Marcus reached into his pocket, his fingers trembling slightly as they brushed against his phone. His mind was calm, but beneath that calm was a storm brewing, one that had been set in motion the moment his worth had been questioned. Unlocked the screen, his eyes scanning the familiar contact list. His thumb hovered over one name though, only one that could shift the balance of power. He typed a quick message, simple and coded. Confirm backup, immediate. No further explanation was needed. The words were enough. The people who knew him, who knew what he had fought for, would understand. He hit send, then leaned back against the bench. His heart was steady, but the fire within him burned bright. The world had just misjudged the wrong person. The next move would be his hand, would change everything. The rumble was deafening, so intense it rattled the windows. A deafening roar shook the terminal, sending passengers into frantic disarray. Chairs clattered to the floor as heads turned, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Over the loudspeaker, a voice tried to maintain composure, but it was drowned out by the deafening sound of two F-22 Raptors screaming past the glass, their jets cutting the air with a terrifying force. "What is happening?" a woman screamed, clutching her purse to her chest, her eyes locked on the military planes outside. Marcus remained still, his face betraying no emotion as the chaos unfolded around him. The terminal's atmosphere had shifted instantly. Passengers once concerned with their upcoming flights now whispered in nervous anticipation. Phones were raised, recording every second of the unexpected spectacle. The planes vanished into the sky, but the air crackled with tension. Whispers turned into questions. Was that real? What's going on? It was clear that this wasn't a random event. The sound faded, but the impact remained. Something had changed. And for Marcus, it wasn't just the planes that had shifted the course of the day. He stood alone in the center of it all, now under an even more intense scrutiny. Inside the air traffic control tower, the mood had shifted from confusion to urgency. Voices rose in alarm as controllers frantically scanned the sky and communications network. At the helm, the head of the tower received the message. General Steele was the passenger in question. The realization hit hard. This isn't just any passenger, one of the controllers muttered under his breath. It's General Steele. We've got a military officer under a command alert. A hushed silence filled the room, and a shift occurred. Their mistake wasn't just embarrassing. It was now a national security issue. Someone had grossly misjudged who they were dealing with. A decorated general, humiliated in public. This wasn't an incident that could be ignored. It was now a matter for the highest military echelons. The tension in the room was palpable. The air felt heavier, as if the responsibility had shifted from the general public to the military machine. The power had begun to tilt in one direction, but those in control weren't ready to admit it yet. Back in the cockpit, the pilot's hands trembled over the controls. The earlier defiance and arrogance in his voice had vanished, replaced by something far less certain. Sweat beaded on his forehead as the gravity of his mistake settled in. "We've got a problem," the co-pilot said, voice shaking. "General Steele. The General Steele. You've got to be kidding me." The pilot swallowed hard. I don't know what happened. We thought he was just another passenger." His voice cracked, realizing that they had made a massive error. The cockpit's communication lines buzzed again, the voice now urgent and panicked. "Return to the gate, immediately. You're about to handle this with the utmost care. General Steele is not to be treated like just another passenger. You do not want to escalate this further." Marcus, sitting in the terminal, could feel the power shift in the air as the pilot and crew began scrambling. They were out of their depth now. His calm composure contrasted sharply with the fear slowly creeping into the crew. He had the upper hand. Standing from the bench, Marcus moved toward the middle of the terminal. The crowd fell silent, everyone instinctively sensing that the moment had arrived. His voice was calm but carried an undeniable weight. "Now," Marcus said slowly, as he made his way to the center, "you'll be reminded who I am." A heavy silence followed. The flight attendant's efforts to vouch for him earlier had been dismissed with cold skepticism. The pilot's doubt had only deepened his resolve. But this moment, right here, would speak louder than anything else. Marcus's words hung in the air, challenging everything that had just happened. He wasn't just any man who'd been wronged. He was General Marcus Steele, a figure of authority and respect. His eyes scanned the room as passengers shifted uncomfortably, suddenly realizing that they had misjudged him. The terminal felt smaller now, as if the walls were closing in, not from the panic of before, but from the weight of Marcus's presence. No one dared to speak. No one dared to look him in the eye for too long. Back in the real world, outside the walls of the airport, things were escalating in ways no one could have predicted. Phones in the terminal buzzed as social media exploded with images and videos of the incident. Headlines were forming faster than anyone could keep up. A decorated black general humiliated at an airport. Military response follows. The tweets came fast and furious. A flurry of notifications exploded across timelines. News outlets began picking up the story, reporting not just on a minor security incident, but on the national outrage that was brewing in the wake of Marcus's mistreatment. The hashtags were already taking shape. Hashtag respect General Steele, hashtag power shift, hashtag justice for Marcus. Soon, the media machine was in full swing, bringing more attention to the injustice that had been served than anyone could have anticipated. As Marcus remained standing in the terminal, a voice came through the radio. This time, it was not a member of airport staff, but a military commander, General Steele. The voice came through with reverence. "We need a visual, sir. Permission to acknowledge you from the air." A hum of respect filled the air, as if the entire terminal had come to a standstill. The rumble of the Raptors seemed a distant memory, but their presence remained in the collective mind. Now, above them, high in the sky, a jet commander was requesting permission to honor Marcus from the air. Marcus's hand hovered over his phone, ready to respond. His calm demeanor a stark contrast to the turmoil that had surrounded him moments ago. But before he could speak, his eyes met the gaze of the janitor, silent, understanding. Without a word, the man gave a subtle nod. It was a shared acknowledgement, a moment that resonated deeper than any words. As Marcus prepared to give his response, he knew that the moment had changed. Everything was different now. The terminal buzzed with a nervous energy, the tension still thick in the air when the announcement came. An airline executive's voice crackled through the overhead speakers, apologizing profusely for the incident and assuring passengers that the pilot had been immediately relieved of duty. The crowd went silent. Some were still staring at their phones, watching the viral video of Marcus Steele's humiliation, now spreading across the world. The exec's voice continued, promising swift action and full accountability for the disgraceful behavior. As Marcus remained standing, the weight of the apology began to sink in. The pilot who had wronged him, who had presumed to belittle him, was now being escorted off the plane, his face pale with a mix of regret and shame. The irony of it all wasn't lost on Marcus. The power had shifted completely. The airline, once confident in their control, was now scrambling to make things right. All while Marcus stood tall, unaffected by their empty words. Marcus's footsteps echoed through the terminal as he made his way to the plane. The tension from before had now transformed into a palpable respect, a shift in the air that felt almost tangible. As he walked, one by one, passengers began to rise. It wasn't coordinated, but there it was, a spontaneous salute. One by one, heads turned, eyes softened, and respect was paid. The once terrified child, who had watched in fear as the drama unfolded, now stood at the front, arms trembling, but his face brightened. He took a cautious step forward, his voice quivering. I'm sorry, sir." Marcus bent down slightly, meeting the child's gaze, his face softening. "It's okay, son. You don't owe me an apology. You were just scared." With a final nod, Marcus straightened and continued his walk, each step a reminder of the dignity he had always carried. The weight of it wasn't just on his shoulders anymore. It was shared by the entire terminal, transformed by the actions of one man who had refused to let his pride be broken. The flash forward to Marcus's homecoming was swift, but emotionally charged. The door swung open, and before he could even step inside, his daughter was there. Her eyes, glistening with unshed tears, met him as she rushed into his arms. "I saw it on the news." "Daddy," she whispered, her voice full of awe. "I'm so proud of you." The pride in her words struck deeper than any apology or media coverage ever could. The public had seen the injustice, but it was the personal moment, the small, intimate victory, where Marcus felt the most vindicated. His daughter clung to him, her small frame pressing against his chest as if trying to hold onto every bit of him. He held her close, his thoughts briefly drifting back to the shame he'd faced earlier. It had all been worth it. This moment of pride in his daughter's eyes was the final proof that he had fought not just for himself, but for everyone who had been silenced. His family had witnessed his strength, and that, more than anything, gave him the closure he had been yearning for. Later that evening, as Marcus sat alone, reflecting on everything that had transpired, he spoke softly to himself, but the words were loud enough to resonate. Dignity isn't what they give you, it's what you decide to hold on to. You can't let anyone steal it from you. Not the pilot, not the airline, not anyone. His voice was steady, a quiet strength behind each word. He had learned that day, in the midst of public humiliation, that real power came from within. It wasn't about what the world handed you. It was about how you chose to stand, no matter the circumstances. Marcus had fought for his dignity, and in doing so, had set a lesson in motion, a lesson that would resonate beyond him, long after the news cycle had moved on, as the day faded, and the quiet settled around him. He understood that his journey had just begun. The power he'd reclaimed was just the beginning of something much greater. Imagine this: you're standing in a crowded terminal, just like everyone else, but then you witness something that shakes you to the core, an injustice happening right in front of you. The same thing happened to Marcus Steele, but what if you were there? What would you do in that moment? Would you stay silent, or would you take a stand for what's right? Think about it. How far would you go to challenge something that's wrong, even if the whole world is watching? We want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share how you'd respond in that situation. Let's talk about it. Your voice matters, and together, we can make sure these stories get heard. If you believe in standing up for justice and challenging the system, like and subscribe. Stay with us for more real stories, powerful narratives, and a platform where truth always has a voice. The movement doesn't stop here.